As we speak, the fog of uncertainty is getting denser and denser in very moment. And we all feel that in the kind, what we have to deliver as leaders gets more demanding. We all feel we live in historical times and we experience historical shifts. And that's, in my view, at least not by coincidence. There is a peculiar regularity in history that it's always the second decade of a century which brings tremendous shifts and transformation. No need to explain you the importance of the year 1918. Some of you will remember from history classes 1815, where the Vienna Congress did a big merger program, bringing together 300 independent states, independent profit centers, if you want, bringing them in to 30 nation states we still have. Not so much known a date, 1713, when Prussia went on the global stage as a European superpower, and even more important, after the Treaty of Utrecht, Spain and France as superpowers became weaker, and Great Britain, the United Kingdom, established kind of a special status, which still lasts until Brexit next year. Again, 1618, the beginning of the 30 Years' War. You remember all these devastating developments by then. Very interesting, 1517, where a startup entrepreneur from Eastern Germany, Martin Luther, attacked successfully the monopoly of the Catholic Church, and probably the most important date, 1414, where China decided under a new Ming emperor to refrain from international activities on the seas with their gigantic fleet they had at that time, and to really focus on domestic issues, which left room for the so-called European expansion. Portuguese went east and founded all the wealth we have right now. And what we see these years were the new activities of China as a kind of a cross return. And again, we are at the end of a second decade of a century, 2020, and I'm truly convinced that history is back, holiday from history is over, and we have to deal with really tremendous changes and transformations. So the very question is how to deal with this and how to lead and to manage this transformation. In my view, in the very area of uncertainty, there is one profession which is really specialized in, and that's the military world. It's the military leader who has been for almost 2,500 years specialized in operating in uncertain theaters. And interestingly, already in the 90s, the US Army War College in Carlisle coined an interesting acronym, Buca, to describe this modern world of uncertainty. And it's spelled we like volatile, U like uncertain, C like complex, and A like ambiguous. That's very much the world of hybrid conflict we had seen for, let's say, the last 25 years. I dare say now it's even more demanding and even more complicated, because there is a second layer or even a second dimension of this VUCA world, which is spelled virtual, unbound, hybrid, and artificial. And it's the combination of these two VUCA which makes the situation so very demanding and so very uncertain. And to give you some examples, if you go on the upper left-hand side and look at combinations between volatility and virtuality, it's the high-speed algorithmic trading, which is something completely new, which really spurs again the already existing volatility in financial markets. Or if you go down to the lower right-hand side and a combination between ambiguity and artificial intelligence, it's artificial food or some crazy chatbots we have nowadays, which show you the way. So we have a tremendously demanding setting leaders have to operate in. So the interesting question is how to operate in this setting. Are there any recipes for success, or is it just impossible to cope with this situation we are facing right now? Leadership in times of uncertainty is something which mainly focuses, in my view at least, on three simple virtues. It's about attention, it's about agility, and it's very much about ambition. And I would like to give you some glimpses on these three virtues, what is meant and why I think this is something which is very much derived from the military world. First, attention. There are many virtues of military leaders, but if you browse through history books and look into the most important military victories and into the most depressing military blunders, there were always some things the great military leaders had in common. And above all, it was attention. They were much more attentive than their enemies. They were very keen on learning about new technologies. They were very open about the reality of their own resources and capabilities. And I think the same applies to the business world. And above all, they were very sensitive to weak, soft, early signals about what will happen next. To take just something which is really occupying us every day, Corona. Some say that's a thing which came by total surprise. I completely disagree. There was already at the beginning of the year 2013 a paper of the German parliament which in detail described what would happen if we would have this kind of virus in Europe. And so far, this description is completely on the spot. It described perfectly what happened in spring this year. And I fear that it also describes perfectly in the second wave we have right now. It's about early warnings to see. Second, the famous Munich Security Conference invited in 2017 a guy named Bill Gates, and he delivered a speech to the top CEOs of Europe, and his speech was about a pandemic, a global pandemic. But basically everybody just ignored what he said and thought, oh, that's just a hobby horse of a crazy billionaire. And I have to say, I didn't take him for serious as well. But there were early warnings. So I think Corona is a tremendous example. What are the fatalities and the results if you really ignore early warnings? So you could spell Corona as a continuous reluctance to observe noteworthy alerts. Second example, some say, oh, the success of Elon Musk and Tesla, that was just coming from nowhere. But that's just not true, because already in the mid of the 80s, there was a German professor at the university in Munich working on autonomous driving. And in the year 95, he took this S-Class Mercedes autonomously almost 2,000 kilometers up to Denmark at a top speed of 170 kilometers per hour. So it was already there, but nobody really was attentive enough to see these early warnings, these early alerts, and these soft facts right at the beginning. Coming to the next one, agility. In the military world, it has been clear ever since that a good plan executed immediately is better probably than the perfect one in 1 or 2 weeks. And the same applies to the business world, as some guys like Mark Zuckerberg know. And what we have seen during the Corona crisis is that even the biggest, the largest decisions can be made within 14 days' time. And it applies to the politics world, and it also applies to the business world. We had decisions about digital tools and platforms which had been luring for 2 or 3 years in big companies, and they had been decided during the crisis within 10 days' time. Also in politics, they had to decide about new work schemes, about big funding, and this all worked out within a 14 days' time. So I say, after this crisis, we know that done is better than perfect, as Mark Zuckerberg says, and that we can decide basically everything within 14 days. And I should say, in this world of uncertainty, probably we should decide everything within a 14 days period. Last point, ambition. Some of you might know the guy on the left-hand side, that's Hannibal, the famous military leader against the Romans in the Battle of Carthago. And what he did, and most successful military leaders, as well as successful businessmen, that he had an obsession to win, that he was believed that he could achieve something which was out of all proportion to his resources and capabilities. And that's the same to the Corona crisis. We know that we don't have the resources right now, and neither we have the capabilities, but we have to have this obsession to win, to defeat this virus. And the same obsession is needed in the business world. And you need a clear view, you need a certain strategic intent, and this ambition has to be really large and really big. So a modern kind of leader in this type, to be really obsessive about what he's doing, is probably Elon Musk, because basically everything he does is out of all proportion, is out all proportion of his capabilities and resources. And everybody said in the beginning, oh, look at this guy, this won't work anyway, especially the arrogant car guys in German large car conglomerates. But in the end, we see Tesla is a fine product, and the others, like Hyperloop or others, will succeed perhaps as well. So what's the point, to sum it up in the end? We are witnessing really the renaissance of uncertainty. And yes, we feel it's damned bumpy these days. But the good news is leadership principles to navigate in this environment of uncertainty are there. It's about attention, it's about agility, and it's about ambition. And the second good news is, yes, little can be planned these days, but basically everything can be shaped. So don't be a planner, don't plan too much, just shape, just build. Thank you very much.